Brilliant. Welcome to another episode of the Trailblazers Experience podcast, and I'm stoked to have my next guest. So, Fran, thank you so much. We've had, for those who don't know, just before we started recording, we've been just having a laugh, which I think just humanizes us as women.
Well, thank you for having me, dear. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and speaks to our character, isn't it? I think if you can't laugh through life, then it's not a sign of perseverance, resilience, and just the ability to crack on with stuff if you need to.
Absolutely. I definitely use it as a coping mechanism for sure.
Yeah. So tell me your story, Fran. So first of all, who is Fran, and what do you think are the events in your life that have led you to this moment where we're going to be talking about your business, but also you as an author?
So, I when people ask me that question, I'm like, the first thing I always think of is I'm a mom.
Where do I start?
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, what led me into freight brokering, or you just want to kind of the whole how I got to where I'm at now?
I mean, we can start about what led you into freight brokering, but I think there's always a backstory before that. So if you tell the
Yep,
backstory before, that'll give us a bit of context.
sure. So, my son, my daughter, and I, we were all trying to put a business together because we wanted to create it. We wanted to create it. We wanted to create wealth for our family because that's not something that we practice. Not that I know of, because I grew up in a single family home. And so when we got together, my son, he had most of the assets. And then me and my sister, we would come in with whatever supplements that we had. And so we kind of went through a couple of ideas. It was either real estate or we would do transportation, and I forgot what the third thing was. A couple weeks into our meetings, my son decided that he wanted something quicker, and we told him that this would take a while if we were going to do real estate. We can't expect that return immediately. And so he decided to go in another direction, and my sister was like, well, sis, why don't we do trucking? And I'm like, I have no clue, no idea what trucking is. And then she was like, well, I'm in trucking school. And I'm like, what? You're in trucking school? She's like, yeah, I'm 2 months away from graduating. I'm like, okay. And then after that, she goes, yeah, I also took a dispatching course. And I'm like, what is that? She's like, well, we gather truckers. We have like a list of them, and then we solicit them to these different freight brokerages or the shipping companies, and then we can get a percentage of that. And I was like, okay, well, where's the course? So she gave me the course. We took the trucking gurus course, and I think that took me about maybe 3 months to absorb everything, and then we hit the ground running. I made flyers because my background is in signage and graphics. And so we came up with the name called Dispatch Help. And so we walked around at like 3 o'clock in the morning with these big old pink bowls on our head with our pink flyers at the ports, passing out these flyers looking like Minnie Mouse and Mickey Mouse.
I mean,
So,
classic door to door salesman type things, isn't it? You
yes,
were doing. Yeah.
yes. But we were at the actual ports with the trucks that were just lined up, and we're like, all right, well, we got you guys. You can't go anywhere because you're waiting to get into the port. So that's how it happened. That's how we got into dispatching. And that's also how I got into freight brokering as well. But there's a little story behind that as well. But I'll let you
I mean,
lead me.
that's really interesting. Just the whole thing that you got together as a family and had a conversation, which I would say culturally, maybe something that's not talked about. I can speak for myself from an African Black culture. Building generational wealth is
Yes.
not something that's talked about because we've had to struggle so much, have only just probably, gained freedoms, whether it's the end of the civil rights movement, colonialization. A lot of things have happened that haven't allowed us to do so. Or even when we do have inherited land from a village, etc., the main goal has been to go to university, educate yourself, blend into the, the society that you're in. So the
Mhm.
fact that you sat down and said, "Uh-oh, we want to do something different. We want to change the narrative. We want to change our story and create generational wealth." I mean, if that's a trailblazer tip over there, for people to have those conversations, I think is pretty good. But your background, so you said, is back as graphics and signage. So how did your sister then think, well, it would be great to do business with you? Who has the business acumen then from the both of you?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I have a lot of experience in project management. I worked with quite a few small businesses. Whenever I worked with these companies, people would always tell me, "Do you own the company?" And I'm, no, I'm just taking ownership of the position that I'm in. If I don't, who is going to? So it was through working with those small businesses, I've learned how to do accounting. I've learned how to do all the back work in order to make a business flow.
Yeah. And what have been some of the challenges you've experienced with this business so far before we
So
talk
with
about the successes?
sure. So with dispatching, a couple of months in, when let me tell you how we actually got started prior to all this happening. So I was telling my sister in marketing, hey, I think we need to go to a trade show. So we ended up going to a trade show called She Trucking. And I felt within myself, and I feel like that's kind of one of the things that we miss as people, is that we need to listen to our intuition. So within myself, I said, man, I think we really need to go, and let's just book this 10 by 10 so that we can have a booth there at the trucking show. So we did. Once again, like I said, because of my background, I had created some shirts there, and then we came up with a trucking line for women called She Class A. And so I utilized that trucking brand in order for us to promote our company called Dispatch Help. So we took t-shirts, we took canvas bags, and then my little flyers, and of course my little Mickey Mouse thing so I could stand out in the crowd. And we ended up, well, she didn't go, but I told her that I was going. And so I did the show by myself, and I ended up meeting a couple of people there. One is Brian from Expeditors, and then it's Tony from Swinton Transportation. And then I also met Simone from My Enterprise. Well, come to find out, Brian, he had like this whole network of vans. What do you call those? What do you call those vans that everybody has? Those like high roof vans?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So cargo vans. And so come to find out that cargo vans are one of the hardest vehicles to dispatch because they're a dime a dozen. You really have to be on the boots on the ground running in order for you to find clients, according to what was told to me. Mind you, once again, my background wasn't transportation. I just know how to hustle. I just know how to call. I'm not afraid to talk to people. And so I ended up connecting with Tony, who was a cargo van driver, and he is also an owner operator. I didn't know that Tony also had a platform on YouTube and Instagram where there were lots of people that are following him because he writes songs about transportation. It sounds funny, but it
It's a
isn't.
hook. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And he just talks about the different struggles he's experiencing while he's in there, or he talks about the money, or he talks about what his thoughts are while he's driving. And I'll send you a link of it, but he's called T Swin. And
That
you
is
wouldn't,
genius.
oh my God, it is so genius.
Yeah.
And anyways, he had shouted me out on a social media platform. And then I had an influx of carriers reach out to me and my sister. And I was like, whoa. Mind you, we had just finished setting up all of our forms so we can do an intake. And so I was calling my sister. I may have been a little bit incessant, maybe a lot of it.
So you went to this trade show, not just to, you were really on that networking tip. You're like, I'm going to have conversations with people. And that's really where your first, big deals and so on then stand out by you just talking to people. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I ran into so many people, even what's her name? They call her Shaq, and she's from Agate Solutions, and like she is a big deal in trucking. And I didn't think that I would meet, people with that. I didn't know she was connected to that game. I just saw her on Truck and Hustle, which is one of the largest podcasts for
Hmm.
the trucking community. And I'm like, is that Shaq? Oh my God, that's Shaq. I'm like starstruck. People get excited over Beyonce. I'm like, that has nothing to do with my pockets.
This one does, because there could be
Yes,
something happening. Yeah. Yeah.
yes.
They could check.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's just she is so knowledgeable that it's really insane when you think about like gurus for different industries. She's one of them for the trucking industry,
And we
and
talked about it
she's a
before.
sister.
Yeah. And we talked about it before the podcast started, because I was reading on women who are not in the business of trucking, but women who are truckers, which is obviously a different sector. And it's
Oh,
not really one that's dominated by women. But the business of trucking, you said there are so many, successful women doing business in your area that you just think, wow, it's something that we also need to educate our young girls out there, that there's something else they can go into.
oh,
Not just the
absolutely.
classic, oh, be an accountant, be a nurse, be a doctor, not everybody can be that. There is another industry out there.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to finish my story for what happened, the struggle.
Yes.
Yes. May I?
Go on.
Okay. So when the influx of drivers came in, I was telling my sister, hey, make sure that we have everything intact, make sure we have all of their insurance information. So she was doing some of the back end because I was still working full time at this time.
Mm.
And so I would call her frequently just to make sure that we're on top of things. And during that week, when the drivers were coming in, she ended up ghosting me. Yes.
Okay. Wow.
So, yes.
So what do you do then?
So when she ghosted me, like I was calling and I was like thinking, oh, maybe there's something going on with the phone. There's all kinds of things running through my mind. So after she didn't answer for 3 days, I just figured that this was a sign either I'm going to put up or shut up. So I put up and I started to, at the same time as I was working, I was looking for loads for the drivers that we had already secured. And so I would do that at the same time. Boy, was that kicking my behind. And so that's what I did. I did that until I was trying to figure out what to do after that. And
Mm.
because of that, I had ended up running into the neighbor who I had seen had all these trucks going by, and I was thinking, "Oh, maybe I can dispatch his trucks." And then when I meet with him, he's like, "Do you have any experience in trucking?" I was like, "Nope, but I know how to hustle." He's like, "Man, you got some balls." And I was just like, "I've heard that before." So he said that he needed a partner because he wanted to open up a freight brokerage, but he didn't have anybody to help him. So I said, I'm with it. So I had became partner with him at All American Port Logistics and still doing dispatch help at the time. But at least I was able to do, both because of that opportunity.
And
So, but
leverage all the contacts you'd gotten at the time, I guess, isn't
yes,
it? Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. I actually, before I left, the owner of the previous company, he wanted me to stay and become a partner with him at the signage company. But I felt like I had already experienced everything that I needed to experience there. I already had hit a plateau in signage for what I felt. And so I couldn't learn anything further. So I just wanted to expand and grow.
Yeah, you saw an opportunity, and there was an interest there. But girl, I mean, when you've been ghosted that way, that could have gone two different ways. You could have just said, look, this is not for me, this is not happening. But what type of resilience or what trait or characteristic do you think you have in you that just made you say, I'm just going to make this happen?
Well, on my daily job, I do project management, and I'm sure that you're familiar with project management. You just have to figure out how to put out fires when they come. So I just figured this is probably just one of those things. And I'm assuming my sister maybe may not have had that experience. And so it may have been overwhelming for her. And so I just said, I put in all this time and effort. Nobody's going to take this away from me. I don't care who it is. So I just went.
So
So the
taking
resilience,
ownership, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah. So I think the resilience really comes from my sales background. When they say people always are telling you no, you're like, okay, great, next, let's keep it pushing. So I think that's really where that comes from. And I've always had a drive to want to become my own company. So I think that really was a catalyst for me to push me into where I am today.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think that drive stems from your childhood? Because you said you come from a single parent household, so obviously seeing the struggle there may have been a catalyst, or
Oh, absolutely. That was definitely one of the factors. And so when I grew up in our household, my mom was on, what do you call that? Like food stamps, cash aid, things of that nature.
yeah.
And it always seemed like we had a shortage at home. And I really hated it. And we always seemed to live with people, and we never really had our own place to stay. And so observing those things made me really want to take my life in another direction. Like, I want to have food in my house consistently. I want to make sure that my kids have a place that is consistent they can call home. And because we move so much, people thought that we were in the army. And
Of course.
I wanted my kids to have long lasting friendships. So I've only moved like maybe 3 times in my adult life, versus when I was a kid, I was in maybe 15 different districts, all up and down the coast of California.
Wow. That's really interesting and good to see that you've just taken the positive out of it. But I was just thinking, so it means you know California really well i- from a
I would
dispatching
say so.
business perspective.
I would say so.
That's on the upside.
Yeah, I would say so.
You know Cali really well. It's really interesting how our early experiences shape us, and it can go in one of two directions. And you've used it as a catalyst to say this is how I don't want my life to be, and these are the three non-negotiables for how my life should be moving forward.
Yeah, I didn't even realize I had non-negotiables at that time, but definitely.
You realize it when you're looking back, isn't it? Reflecting on your life. So how long have you had then this business? So obviously pivoting from graphics and so on. How long have you been in this industry then?
So I've been in this industry for almost, no, for 2 years.
Wow.
Yep, 2 years. Crazy. Can't believe how fast the time flies. It started with COVID.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Has it
Yeah.
been your post pandemic or post COVID pivot success story?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we started in 2020. And then as we were doing dispatching, that's when I ran into my partner, my business partner now. And so I guess 3 years total.
And
Yep.
enjoying it still?
I'm here.
Yeah.
It is definitely paying the bills. I'm really grateful that for this it was a low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for doing freight brokering and dispatching, you just need the basic necessities, setting up your LLC, things of that nature. All you really need to do is the hustle of it, making the calls, not being afraid to hear no. doing little flyers, which you can, do on Fiverr and those things of that nature.
Mm.
Just, yeah. And then also, too, with the freight brokerage, you just have to set up your security bonds and things like that, insurance. So as long as you have those basics covered, you should be fine if you're continuing to, make the calls to have the business come in consistently.
Yeah. And it's good that you've mentioned that, because I think a lot of the time, you know, we were talking about it earlier about how social media is just painting such a very different picture. You still have to do the work. Like
Yeah.
that checklist you just run through, those are the basics. Yes, it
Yep.
is a low barrier to entry, but in order for you to actually make a profit, you know, when you're looking at your balance sheet, all of these things that you've just run down have to be done, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think
Good.
that that's a valuable lesson.
Yeah. I think people have this, like you said, in social media. Oh yeah, this is what this looks like. You're gonna make this much money. How long did it take for you to get there? And then what context did you utilize to get there? So
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So do you still do trade shows as well? Is that something that you still do then as part of the business? Yeah.
yes, I will be at a trade show on the 20th and 21st at the Business Expo in Los Angeles. So that will be for a freight brokerage. So I won't have my little Mickey Mouse ears, so it won't be that easy to find me.
But you've just plugged it, so we'll put it in the show notes so people will can
Okay.
come and have a chat definitely. But
Thank
look,
you
you've
for asking.
evolved. You've gone from your little hat
Yep, yep.
to
I'll just
being the
have this
business.
big old red circle.
Yeah.
That's our logo.
Amazing,
Uh, I
amazing.
think I came up with a little slogan to put on the back. I'm gonna put a QR code and I put scan me if you can. So if they try to scam me, I'm gonna run away.
You know, it's all these little things that you just need to pick up and go away with. You know, you don't want to have lots of paperwork for people to fill out. If it's a QR code they can scan, and you
Yeah.
know, you get their contacts that way, you get your leads, then
Yep.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't lose them. Like you said, paperwork.
So you've shared just quite a bit. I mean, having such a colorful career and transitioning into other things. You're also an author. So
Yes.
what made you decide to say, you know what, I'd love to write a book and actually do it, write the book?
So initially, when I was writing a book, um, a gentleman that I used to date who was Nigerian, he had said that I should write about my experiences. And I did, but it didn't quite work out that way. It wasn't until my youngest, I think she was like maybe 14 at the time. I don't know if teenagers go through a phase, but I was definitely experiencing uh, some friction at this time in our life. She wouldn't listen to me. Like when I would tell her something to do, she would talk back. And for I think a lot of for a lot of quote unquote minorities or communities of color, that kind of behavior isn't acceptable. And so my first thought was revert to how you were raised when you were younger, which in a Pacific Islander household, everything was corporal punishment. The answer to everything was fear. Was created through fear. If you're listening, it's because I told you so. There is no dialogue of, hey, can I do this? There isn't any asking. There's, I speak, you do, go complete the task and come back. Is that the same with your experience growing up or?
Yeah, yeah. I think it all stems from, you know, the hierarchy of culture. So your traditions, and
Yes.
your parents are the head of the household. And it's interesting, when I was growing up, I thought my parents were just too strict. I just thought,
Mm,
surely you need to let me live a little, because what's the purpose of all of it? But now in hindsight, when I look back, you know, and say, I understand. So my parents grew up in three different ways. So they grew up during colonialism, so where there was segregation, where they weren't allowed to go to certain parts of was known as Rhodesia unless you had a pass. And
mm,
then their family didn't go to school, so they wanted to go to university. They were the first ones to go to university. And also, in order for you to travel or work in European or American or Asian countries, usually careers that you should have done are the classic doctor, lawyer, engineer, because they open up doors in terms of the type of visas you could get. So when I now hear everything that they went through, I understand why they were so strict and why they. But on the other hand, I have two boys. I've done a combination of both where I'm strict, but I'm also trying to communicate, trying to be more open, let them actually have curfews, let them I'm trying to do both, but also realizing, okay, I've got black boys. I also need to school them on what potentially could happen to them. So I'm sort of torn, and I understand why our parents probably just chose the let's just keep it real and strict and hardcore. But I
Right.
think there is a way to evolve to parent to match the society that we're in now.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
I had to also take that into consideration too, like what we were talking about, how I grew up, especially like with there being, um, I don't know if I mentioned the emotional connection between me and my mother, because that connection also too affected the way that I parented.
Mm,
So my mom was emotionally unavailable. And like you said, we have to understand where they come from in order for us to have some type of empathy. And as you mentioned earlier, we do have, or there will be opportunities for us to adjust ourselves to the society that we live in now in order to create more of a dynamic between us and our children. So I lost my train of thought.
you were talking to me about why you wrote the book.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, yes. Sorry,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah, yeah.
So it was the dynamic that was occurring between me and my 14-year-old, that I couldn't marry the culture of how I had grown up with how she was trying to explain how she wanted to connect with me as a parent. And because she gave me so much pushback, I really had to look at myself
Mm,
and figure out how this dynamic would work. But it really didn't hit home until that same week. Like, an incident like that happened at work. Another incident happened with my best friend, which made me all come circle back to what had happened with my daughter. And I had to really do some deep diving into self. And that's how I started writing the book, was working on the characters that Frances did not like.
it's a bit of you working through your childhood traumas, isn't it? It's a bit like
Yes,
therapy in a way. Unpacking, in order for you to give advice to others, you had to unpack yourself.
absolutely. Absolutely. A gentleman that I was dating at the time, he mentioned that I should go to therapy. And I thought, okay, well, I'll try it out. I've tried it out before, but I really wasn't sure how how that dynamic was going to help. But I am so grateful. I'm so grateful to him for just even mentioning that, because he was also a, what do you call it? He was also a facilitator and learning how to communicate with my children as well. So because of that experience that I had with him, it really helped me to open up myself to not be so rigid in the way that I do things.
Yeah. So if I was to ask you, because obviously, who do you think this book is for? Can you hear me? Who is it for?
I think it's for people that have behaved in one way for so long that now life is asking them to change. And if they feel that they're stuck, this is an opportunity for them to find a tool that will help them get unstuck.
That's a really good one. To get unstuck. And
Yes.
from how has the book been received? Do you think there's a part two? There's another one in you to
There is actually, I'm
Yeah.
writing a prologue to my book on how I got to where I am now. Because, as you asked me earlier, what's the backstory? We all have these different things that affect us. And I think in order for us to really have a full scope of where you are now, we need to know where you came from and how that has affected your thinking. And you see the transition of what was to what is now. So the new book that I have coming out is called Victim and Violator. And you'll see the two different dynamics there. And whew, I talk about some things in there that I'm definitely ashamed of having participated in. But once again, if we don't share the whole aspect of what we've been through, you really don't have the full story. You can't be vulnerable. You can't connect with people. And like you said earlier, the whole humanizing. Yes, I'm an author. Yes, I published, but I had to live and experience in order for you to hear this story. And I'm sure it's the same for you. I probably can't live in your shoes if I experience the life that you lived. We all are given different strengths to live the lives we live so we can be where we are now.
Yeah. One of the things I took away from the book was taking ownership.
Yes.
So yes, I come from a different country. I was raised a different way, but I've got two boys who are being raised here in the UK. Have been raised in Germany and then in the UK. So I need to then have that balance of saying, right, those were my traditions. This is a tradition that I think I'd love us to continue because it's
Mhm.
rooted in culture, history, etc. But there's certain things, behaviors that I don't think I want us to carry forward. If it doesn't serve us now, let it go. And oh my God, Fran, that was like a moment for me. It was like a full circle moment, letting go of things that no longer serve you because you're just putting yourself in a necessary bondage. It impacts the relationships you have with the opposite sex. It influences your drive, your ability to how you work in your career, how you network. It does have an impact, and those are the things that you sort of need to unpack. So that for me was the biggest lesson coming out of that for myself. So Fran, talk to me about your core values and your beliefs. If someone was to say, right, so Fran, she owns a trucking dispatch company. She's a partner in logistics brokerage firm, and now she's an author. What what are the core things that drive you?
I think one of the things that drive me today is one, not being broke.
Meant that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And the second thing is to make sure that when I'm doing something that there's a mission behind it, that I
Mhm.
have intention of whatever that goal is. Like for being an author, my intention and my goal is to reach people that need to be healed, especially if they come from the kind of background that doesn't allow their voice to be heard.
Mm.
I want them to find their voice. And like I said earlier, to become unstuck so they can find the authenticity within themselves. Because when we do find our authenticity, we also find our passion. And when we find our passion, oh my God, there's so many doors and opportunities that open up for us because the old way of thinking has been buried. And now we can move forward with whatever this beautiful gift of discovery is, and just make an imprint on the world with only the way that we can within our own essence.
That is so beautiful. I mean, yeah, it's it's a whole cycle of life, isn't it? It's the whole
Yeah.
reason for being to find your authentic self, be your authentic self, and allow that to. We know people who probably will never discover who they are, and if you can find that already in your 20s or even earlier,
Yeah,
that's like you're destined for great things, whatever it is that you want decide to do.
absolutely.
It's it's so hard because we are still plagued by societal norms of what women should be, what men should be, what careers you should, and it's there needs and it's not there in any of the educational systems, whether it's US, Europe, Africa, is to you know, how to find out what your true voice is and what your true talents and capabilities, and then giving you the financial literacy, I think, to be able
Right.
to say, right, how do I turn this into something that will make sure that A, I'm not broke.
Right.
That
Right.
connection is
Yeah.
there at
No, it
all.
isn't. It isn't at all.
Uh, yeah. Talk to me about your circle. You've talked about your family, your business, and how important your circle has been to, you as an author, as a business owner, throughout your life.
So my circle of friends is very small. I can count on one hand who I can call for advice.
I
So
mean, we know that's to be true, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it's I feel like it's good, and in some sense I feel like a kind of grievance almost, because it's like these people that you've called friend and sis throughout the years, and now they're no longer, it's not that they're not capable, but they can't hang with you because you've elevated to where that kind of behavior, like you said earlier, is no longer serving me.
Mm.
And so if you continue to have these conversations with those people, you continue to have the same conversations and there's no elevation. And that's not to put a dim on the way that they move in their own life. But I think as people who want to expand and grow, they need to move in a different direction. Oh, what's the saying? If you want different results, you can't go in with the same thinking that you went in that created the problem. So my circle of friends, it's only two. There's Fran, and it's funny, my best friend's name is Fran, and I'm Fran. And then, and I'm not talking about myself.
Right. Just checking.
Right, right.
It's a different podcast. The other Fran is in the room. Okay.
Yes, that's Fran V, and I'm
Yeah.
Fran L. And then there's Simone from my enterprise, when I was mentioning earlier that I met in Tennessee.
Hmm.
So Simone, I utilize Simone in our friendship and then also business. So she's definitely there to help me with that aspect. And then Fran, she helped me through the transition with in the second chapter of my book, when I talk about having a problem with the owner where we were butting heads. I literally called her almost every day venting about this guy for a whole year and a half. She was like my therapist. And I'm like, I can't believe this. Oh gosh, I would call her in such a flurry of emotions, and she'd be like, Fran, take a breather. She would coach me into calming down so I can let her know what my emotions were. So she was just kind of my therapist, and she's been there. So even we've known each other since I was 14.
She
So
takes on the role of active listener, but also
yes,
when she said, right, do you want me now to give you a solution? She's also
yes.
there to say, I think this is what you should do.
Yeah, she's also a social worker, so she does like trainings for quite a bit of people. I told her that she should do that as a consultation, but everybody has their own path that they want to take. But she
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely, because I said, after this, I think you need to come into our company and help us overall, overhaul our communication amongst our team.
Yeah. But it's interesting because the friendships the friendships I sought when I was very young were friendships of validation. I wanted them to validate
Mm,
me and who I was. It was really terrible, honestly.
yeah.
And I have always had a self-confidence in me, and my parents always says you're unique, you're special, you're beautiful, you're bright, but I wanted somebody else to validate that. And then at some point,
100%.
Fran, I just said, you know what? This is not serving me. I'm surrounding myself with people who don't really care about me, have nothing to offer. And I think it was Oprah said, look at the 5 people that you surround yourself with, even if it's 3 or 2. And if they're all idiots, well, you're an idiot as well. And I was like,
Yes.
oh my God, I need to change my circle really quickly, but also do things that serve me.
Yeah.
And in that way, you also attract people who are intelligent, knowledgeable, can give advice, can hold you
Yes.
accountable. Your circle just changes already. It just goes in a whole different direction. And if someone was to say, well, would you go on a girls trip with some of the women I was, affiliated with 20, 25 years ago, I'd probably say no. It's like,
So when for yourself did you find that transition occurring for you as far as your circle of friends?
yeah, I think that happened for me when when I got married, and two, when I got pregnant, and I realized they don't have children, I do. And I
Mm,
was going in a different direction of how I wanted my life to be. And then I was also thinking of career prospects. That's when I knew how tough it was to be not only a woman, but if you were a woman with a child, you had to work 5 times as hard to even progress in your career, because the common thing was, oh, but who's going to look after the kid? How are you going to manage with childcare? I just used to find it so weird saying, how come you're not asking my male counterparts that question? But
mm,
that was a big pivotal thing, because my circle had immediately changed. I could not just go out on the weekends because I had a baby at home.
right.
And also I did not want to. I wanted to do other
Mm,
things. And when I said things like, oh, how about we have a day of going to, I'm very much into arts and culture. So I'd say, there's an exhibition in town on a Saturday. Can we do that? And they'd say no. And I said, okay, I will go by myself. Went there, found a community of women who were similar to me, and suddenly just started, you see yourself breaking away from that circle, and you don't feel bad about it. You just say, okay, I'm actually feeling much better about myself,
mm,
my integrity, my values. I'm being seen, I'm being heard, I'm being respected, and I'm being empowered. So when I had ideas for things I wanted to do, it was acknowledged, it was praised, it was just a
mm,
different dynamic. And only because I had to make that transition, I didn't wait for them to say, we don't want to hang out with you. I had
right.
to then say, this is not serving me at all.
Mm,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing.
So my circle is very small. 3 very close friends. I still have, people who I talk to, but close circle, 3. That's it.
You got one on me.
I
It
think
just
it's
kind
just
of happens that way, huh?
yeah, yeah. And also what I find fun is, I mean, the internet, we would have never met each other,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I think it's so powerful how you
Yeah.
can connect with people. I mean, my first connection of people was with MySpace. You probably remember MySpace.
I
So
do. I had a profile. I can't fake it. I did. I think if you type out my name, you can still find the MySpace profile.
because you can't delete it for some reason. I don't know what's but
Oh,
yeah, so
goodness.
circling back, talking about your circle, you have 2 people who just acknowledge you. Networking, I think, is still a very big part of your business. So if we're talking about the business aspect, how how has that evolved for you over time, and how have you finessed the art of networking?
I don't know if I've really finessed it, but I still join like the chamber meetings that occur, or like earlier I mentioned going to a trade show, which I don't believe the company that I'm with now had actually utilized that as a tool in the past. So
Mm.
this is actually something new for them. And just creating different connections wherever I go. I'm always thinking about, for me, I'm always thinking about work. It's just a part of my daily process. It's like I am the individual that has a business, and it's just something that just comes out in conversation. I don't know how to separate the two. I don't know if you do, or you can give me some tips on that, but
What I realized is, when I went to my first networking event, it was so weird because all I was talking about was my job and my CV. And a friend, a good colleague of mine who I'm still very close with, She said, that's not how it works. I was like,
Mhm.
what do you mean? It's like, you're not here to run through your CV and what you did in 1991 and 92. You're here to meet people.
Mm.
So just talk about things that interest you, hobbies, current events, like the biz.
Yes.
Don't even bring up the business side.
Yes.
I was like, but then it means I've just talked, and then what's going to happen afterwards? She was like, well, you might exchange contacts. When you exchange contacts, when you do a follow up, just highlight something that you talked about that made sense. Don't once again run through your CV. The
Yes.
third time, maybe you might meet again for a coffee and then something. But also, if the person is genuinely interested in what you have to offer in terms of a business or a service or a product, they will immediately make that clear. If not, you continue the networking circle.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood the question, but yes, I that is actually how I approach it because before we are in our company and in the business of things, we forget about the human portion of us. So I never
Yes.
really like to open up. I do my 30-second spiel if that's what they
Yeah.
want,
Yeah.
but I do connect with them on a different topic, like you said, uh, because nobody wants to hear that initially. What they say,
Yeah.
nobody cares until they know that you care.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So we
Yeah.
want to
But it's
connect
a
them.
30-second opener. It's like, yeah, I've got a brokerage business, full stop. It's not,
Right.
oh, and I've been in this for 25 years and I've got this. And if you need this, I can give you a discount. No, it's just keep,
We call it salesman's vomit.
is that what it is? Salesman's vomit.
Yeah, it's a salesman's vomit because it's like, okay, I'm not sure why that's relevant. Actually, I don't even know why you approached me.
No, right? Those awkward moments where you're standing and talking and you realize, okay, this conversation is going nowhere.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Totally. I can
uh
remember my first networking event, and it was like nothing but Pacific Islander, what do you call that? Pacific Islander businesses. And I thought to myself, what the heck? I have no formal training in how to do networking. And the first thing that popped up in my head was church. So in church, the pastor would say, go around and greet your neighbor. So that's what I did. I greeted my neighbor.
oh, any Bible verses? I could just hear you
Oh,
now.
I didn't.
4:13, I can do all things.
I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. No, I didn't do that. But I knew I needed some strength at that event because I was nervous and had no clue. But once again, it goes back into that resilience thing that you asked about earlier. It's like,
Yeah,
what pushes you?
on your feet.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think that's it. You could have done that or had a panic attack and then nothing was gonna.
Well, I think when you have an event with food, I think that kind of even keels out the situation. You can talk about food when you're there.
Yeah. Yeah. And Fran, the reason why I asked this question is once again, there's some young lady woman who's gonna Google this podcast, start watching it, and then the part on networking will come up. And really, go to the networking event is what we're
Yes.
saying. But maybe there is a book that someone's written, but honestly, it's people that you're dealing with, and just think logically and just have a conversation. Start off there.
Boom.
Um, and see where it goes.
Don't quote Bible scriptures.
No, don't do that. No,
No Jehovah
I want
Witnessing.
no, no, because you never know. What if someone's an atheist? What if they don't like religion? So you need to pick and choose
Absolutely.
neutral topics that resonate with everyone. I remember going to one of my first networking events, and the guy had a notepad. It was the days of business cards, and literally, it was one of those where you could open it and you could slide your business card in. And
Yeah.
it was immediate. He was like, "Yep, so we need to be in contact." And the company I was working for at the time, they were very strict with printing out business cards. I don't know why, budget thing and so on. So, and the business cards were really nice. So you only gave them out when you really wanted that person to contact you.
Hmm.
And I just found it a bit cheesy. So someone else said, well, what I do is I memorize the person's name, and two things they've told me about themselves. So if they say they're into, I don't know, football, and they talk about their favorite team, that connects them together, so that if they ever meet again, that's the thing they'll remember,
Mm.
versus you trying to write down stuff. Now at a trade show stand, obviously you're there to prospect and get contacts, but it's those little things, like just remembering someone's name, remembering something they said that resonated. It does go further when they're deciding who they want to respond to on an email or a cold call. But yeah, I'll never forget him with his massive book. He was there.
He was just collecting leads so
I
we
know.
can say he did something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly
Yeah,
that.
I think that's very important. Like you said, when we are talking to people to connect them with, something that they said. I also do connect the person with what they do for work, and if
Mm,
they said something that's relevant, I'll also
yes.
bring that up in the conversation because it
Yeah.
it lets them know that you are actually listening.
Yes. You're actively listening to what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
In their expression. Circling back now, we've talked about a lot of things. You've had a very colorful life, colorful career, but one thing that I think is just resonating with me is you're living a life of intent, of
Mm.
purpose. You don't do things that you don't enjoy. Like if it's not serving you, you're you're sort of letting these things go. What do you think are your plans now for the next? If you look on 5 years and we talk to you, then what's Fran doing at that moment?
I think 5 years from now, Fran will be doing public speaking for a living. So I definitely see myself at TEDx events, just having different conversations to where people can empower themselves and find the gift that may have been buried. That I think that's really one of the main things that pushes me is I because my voice was suppressed for so long when I was younger, I want
Mm,
others to experience their own voice in their own essence, in their own way, and express that in the world. Because I think people think sometimes when they don't have a mission or if they don't feel like they have a purpose, they're like, here I am again, waking up and going to work.
mm.
And I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again. I think when we do have that mission and that purpose, it really changes the outlook of how we approach things and how we live life or how we can live life.
And even the outcome. I mean, that resonates so much. The fact now we can go on YouTube and type in whatever we're looking for.
Yeah.
And if your face pops up and you're speaking to me, that's already a life-changing moment as to whatever situation I was in at the time, whatever doubt I had. It's just that one voice to say, right, I can do this. I can pick myself up again. I can move in this different direction. Fear is our biggest, hurdle, isn't it?
Oh,
Fear of
it
trying,
absolutely
fear of
is.
failure.
I
Yeah.
think I heard Brene Brown say something like, if you have fear. No, she was having a conversation and she said she allows fear to have its voice. And she says that I hear you, I heard your grievances, but I cannot allow you to drive where we are going at in our life. You're
Mm,
invited, but you can't drive. And so, with the different things that I do in my life, I try to make sure to keep that in the back of my mind because, some of the undertakings or the voyages that we take in our lives, they can be scary,
mm.
but do it even if you're scared, do it scared anyway, is what she said.
I love that. Trailblazer takeaway tips. I feel like you've shared so many. If you were to share three, what would they be?
One would be whenever you go to a space, always ask yourself the question, um, l- always leave a place better than you found it. I think the second thing would, like we said earlier, we talked about ownership. And when you do find yourself in a space where you do have to take ownership for something and it may not be something that you liked. I think having the guts and having the fortitude to say that, hey, I messed up, creates more of a connection for the long term with whomever that group is that you've connected with. And the third thing is to be authentic, is to try to find what that authenticity is, regardless of the bells and whistles or the tools that people say that are going to make us stand out. Authenticity is one of the essential things that cause us to stand out, because nobody can say the things the way that we say it. Nobody can express the things the way that we can express it. Nobody can bring into fruition the things that the way that we can do them. So authenticity would be my third thing.
Amazing. Fran, this has been great. I would encourage everyone to buy the book called Can You Hear Me? And I look forward to seeing you at the next TEDx in the future.
Thank you.
And I'm sure your story will inspire some young woman, girl out there who's contemplating, thinking about, what do I do with my life? Is there a different direction I can take? And if so, what can I do? Is there someone who is out there representing? I think you are.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, my dear.
So to our lovely viewers, this has been the Trailblazers Experience podcast. Tell another woman about the podcast, subscribe and share. Thank you so much.
Thank you.